Wyoming Congresswoman Harriet Hageman is among Republicans in Congress calling out federal officials for an armed, intimidating response to a South Dakota ranch family's home over a 75-year-old property line dispute. Cowboy State Daily's Mark Hines reports that the letter signed by Hageman mentions the South Dakota case specifically as an example of an alleged broader pattern of misuse of federal law enforcement against American citizens during the administration of former President Joe Biden.
Last year, we reported on a ranch family in South Dakota, and the wife and mom of that family actually is a Wyoming native. And this weird dispute started with the federal government claiming that their fence had crossed over into some national grassland. In other words, unauthorized taking of federal property. So they thought they had the matter settled, but then an armed Forest Service agent in tactical gear showed up to hand them federal indictments for allegations of theft of government property.
Hageman and the others who signed the letter called the response blatant abuse of government power and unnecessary intimidation of U.S. citizens.
Hey there, friends. Welcome back to As a Man Thinketh on UNjust TV. Still out here this morning trying to get some wildlife. But today I wanted to talk about a story that, with all the undoings that the Trump administration has done, I'm surprised they have not jumped on this one. This is something that a lot of us feel is completely unjust. Something is a complete overreach. In my opinion, just an abuse of power. So many of you have heard about the Mod family who got indicted in South Dakota in June of last year. Now, I think it's interesting. Well, they do have a case, by the way. It's coming up. April 29th is the court date that's been set. They've been able to put it off until now. I think a lot of people are still hoping that this will get in front of the Trump administration's eyes before it even has to go this far. And I do have insight into, so let me back up just a second here. So they got indicted June, right? The regional director for the USFS retired in May of that year. So, and there wasn't another one appointed until July. So during this time when this family got indicted, there really wasn't a regional director for the area. So just to be clear, Frank Biom was the Regional 2 forester. He's the one that retired in May. And Troy Heihecker became the Regional 2 forest manager at the end of July. And when Troy became the regional forest director, I believe it was him who actually reached out to the Mods and said, hey, let's talk about this, because this is a civil case. The Mods family, they got indicted because they have they installed a pivot system to save on water. Heaven forbid they want to save on water. They put in a pivot system in a bottom that they have irrigated with their family for 100 years. I mean, they've been out there. They're one of those homesteading families, and they've irrigated this bottom for a very long time. There's even an old fence line that apparently is in the wrong place. But if you guys have looked at the maps out west and in some of these areas, you'd see that this isn't an unusual thing. There's always been these discrepancies over U.S. Forest Service land versus private land. And the Congress actually put into place a lot of different tools that they could use to handle these situations without this type of thing coming up. So you have no regional director, nobody to hold this guy, Travis Lunders, accountable. And so he goes in and indicts the Mods for stealing over 20 acres of land, or about 20 acres of land in this bottom, because it's over $1,000 worth of land, right? I mean, so these people individually were indicted. That means they each face $250,000 fine and up to 10 years in prison.
Ancient eras and natural selection have refined and tailored pristine fibers with the resilience for today's days. Evolving beyond the last ice age, bison wool is nature's most dependable activewear. Buffalo Wool Company, 100% proven by nature, 100% American made.
Check out the Buffalo Wool Company collection at yanasatradingco.com. Sorry about that, guys. Just realized my sound had cut off during that last recording. So they each face $250,000 worth of fines and up to 10 years in prison. And I don't know everything that I had talked about before, so I'll kind of go back over some of this. So the mods were indicted in June of 2024, and the previous regional director, Frank, retired in May. And then they had a new regional director who took over in July. So I think that's important to consider in all of this. Don't want people to get a bad feeling in their mouth about the U.S. Forest Service, because they do important things. But the point is that these guys, this guy Travis Lunders was acting without having really that much oversight, if you think about it. He didn't have anybody saying, hey, you shouldn't indict these people for having their irrigation system going over 20 acres. We should work this out in civil court and figure out what the discrepancies are in the property lines. None of that happened. Travis took it to Allison Ramell, who was the federal prosecuting attorney for South Dakota, and being a young, newly appointed prosecuting attorney by the Biden administration, she said, yeah, sure, let's press charges against these people. Let's send them to jail. Let's fine them to oblivion and hopefully bankrupt them, and then we could take their land. I don't know if that's what she said, but I'm just saying, she definitely went along with it. Very few questions asked, right? I would like to see the Trump administration pay a little bit of attention to this case. This is not something that should be going to criminal court. It should have never gone there in the first place. This is something that is a civil court matter, and it really, if you look at the programs that we have between ranchers and U.S. Forest Service in managing all of our lands across the United States, these relationships are extremely important. And for ranchers to feel threatened by a Forest Service agent is just completely out of line. Now, I do have on fairly good authority that the new regional director, Troy, I believe, reached out to the mods and said, hey, let's talk about this. And they had gone back and forth a little bit about how to do that. A lot of attorneys, a lot of paperwork. At the end of the day, they decided not to meet. And I don't know if that was because the Department of Justice was like, no, you can't meet with these people, or if that was a situation where the mods attorneys said, look, the last time they did this, it turned into entrapment. So either way, they didn't meet to discuss it. Trial goes on. It's set for, I believe, April 29th. Just heard mountain lion chirps. So I changed direction for a little bit there so I can see what's coming in that direction. Anyway, I'd love to catch some mountain lions on camera. Been trying for years, have been really unsuccessful with. On January 22nd, several members of Congress, let's see if we could see this here, Harriet Hagman, Dusty Johnson, Jim Jordan, you probably know him, he's chairman of the Committee on Judiciary, and Bruce Westerman sent a letter to Allison Ramell, that's the U.S. Attorney in the district that is prosecuting the mods. We are conducting oversight of the Department of Justice, including the misuse of federal law enforcement resources against American citizens. Last year, the Department of Justice and the United States Forest Service seemingly weaponized law enforcement resources to intimidate Charles and Heather Maud, a ranching family with long-standing presence in western South Dakota, who are a part of the property line and land use permit dispute with the USFS. The mods are now facing criminal indictments from your office related to the ongoing property dispute. Following the indictment, leading cattle industries condemned USFS and Department of Justice's handling of the land dispute. As part of our continuing oversight, we request a briefing about your office's handling of this matter. So things are about to get fairly interesting. So some folks have asked me, why doesn't Trump just step in on this? And the Secretary of Agriculture does have the ability to kind of put an end to all of this because it's U.S. Forest Service, which is under the Department of Agriculture, and it's USDA land that's a part of this dispute. And basically, a little background on it, the mods had a land lease to grazing lease on the land that's in question to begin with. There was an old fence line, probably about 100 years old, that everybody assumed was a property line. A lot of these property lines were based upon the river that runs out there, and this river has changed position numerous times. Anybody can see that just from looking at Google Maps. I mean, they had an irrigation system, an irrigation ditch, which ran off the river through USDA land. It was all permitted. And that ditch, so this is an old irrigation agreement to begin with. That ditch basically fed water into this bottom that they had been growing crops on for about 100 years. They met with another department of the USDA and determined that they were losing a lot of water through the ditch irrigation system. So what they ended up doing was they installed a pivot system. Pivot systems aren't perfect. They don't operate, with land lines. It's, kind of pivots all the way around. It's kind of a perfect half circle. So they decided that by putting in the pivot system, they'd save a lot of water. So this is really kind of water conservation if you think about it. The pivot system goes over on USDA land, or supposed USDA land. It's within the fence line that was always determined to be kind of the property line. It goes over that by about 20-30 acres. And 20-30 acres out there is not a lot of land. You could probably put a cow-calf pair on it if you're lucky. Okay, this is South Dakota. So there's not a high production volume that you can really get out of this little chunk that this pivot system goes over. Basically, a hunter, I say that in quotations because I have my own theories on that. I don't want to bring in my theories of the hunter or what their intentions were or what I think was going on there, because that's besides this point. There's enough here that this entire thing should be dropped. But basically, this hunter complained that there was no trespassing sign put up on the property because they like to cut through it to get to hunting lands. And I agree we should maintain access to hunting lands. It's something that's very important. Out here where I am, it's very important they maintain the ability to hunt some of these cougars so that they don't overpopulate. And when that happens, then I'm sure I'll see one a lot faster when they don't have enough food sources. But They basically, this entire thing is just kind of ridiculous the way it started. Travis had gone out there, met with them, acted all friendly, buddy, was just really trying to get information on them to indict them. They agreed to get a survey to settle the dispute, and basically, fine, we'll do a survey, we'll see, where this property line actually is, and then we'll try and figure out a solution to it. And because of the property line disputes out west, there are a lot of resources that Congress has put into place that would allow situations like this to be amicably addressed, whether it's a land swap, whether there's a purchase or an adjustment of property lines. In this case, it's a very small amount of land. Nothing compared to the 1,400 acres in Colorado that they walked out, fenced off, and the U.S. Forest Service just kind of went out and very nicely rolled up the wire and said, okay, we'll go to civil court and everybody can make their case as to whose land it actually is. Nothing like that. What I think happened, and I'll get back to my thoughts on why the Trump administration hasn't jumped in yet. But what I think happened, and from what my understanding is from other conversations, is that this guy, Travis Lunders, went out a couple days later with his own survey crew, because that makes sense. Hey, we have a dispute, so I'm going to survey, and I'll tell you exactly where that line is, right? So he goes out with his own survey crew and trespasses across their land. I think the Bloom property next door, he trespassed across without their permission. And part of this is, okay, when you do the survey, let us know. You shouldn't just be coming across our land without our permission, okay? So it was decided up front that permissions would be given, but notifications would be given as well. No notification, guy shows up with a survey crew. Several days later, they're marching across private property from the neighbors, from theirs, to get this survey done. Well, Mrs. Maud confronted him about it, and I think she hurt his feelings a little bit. I mean, and I know what it's like to get your feelings hurt when you're somebody of authority and somebody questions your authority, even though you are breaking the law and should be indicted yourself for trespassing. She confronted him about it, and he didn't really like it that much. And so he turned around and he went to Allison Ramsdale, this young prosecuting attorney put in place by the Biden administration. I am sure she was completely qualified for the job, especially considering what she did here. Without having a regional director, there's really nobody there to provide any oversight, and we all know that the guys upstairs in the Biden administration probably loved seeing this happen. She decides to press charges with Travis Lunders and threaten this family trying to put food on the table for American citizens with jail time over this 100-year-old fence line and irrigation dispute, in which case other agencies of the Department of Agriculture were aware of when they switched to a pivot system. So basically none of this should have ever happened. These people were unsupervised children pressing charges, in my opinion. Anyway, it happened. It happened, and it's trying to destroy these people's lives. Here's a good thing, though. If this does go to court, and I don't think it should. I really don't. For a lot of reasons, I don't think it should go to court. But if this does go to court, they're going to be put in front of a jury of their peers in South Dakota. Nobody's going to find them guilty of what should be a civil matter. Okay, you have to show criminal intent. There's no criminal intent here. It's just one big misunderstanding of where the property line should have been or where it shouldn't have been. Once they are proven not guilty, they can take Allison Ramsdale and Travis Lunders to the freaking cleaners. They could sue the U.S. Forest Service and make the taxpayers pay too. I hope what happens is they just take these two guys to the cleaners, because they can. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. They have been weaponized against and persecuted for something that they should have never been in this situation. Anyway, so the Trump administration has to appoint. Well, as you all know, he's got several appointees to all the different departments, and Congress has to approve each and every single one of these individuals. My guess is that they're not going to touch a case when it comes to the Department of Agriculture until after they've sworn in their new Secretary of Agriculture. I'm hoping that once his Secretary of Agriculture is appointed, and I think that she would do a good job. And I definitely don't think that she's somebody who would allow this to continue. I'd be curious to see if this case ever even goes to trial. I would think at this point in time, Travis Lunders and Allison Ramsdale would be terrified to let this thing go to trial based on what could happen to them as the fallback once they're proven not guilty. And it's a total government overreach situation. Now, as you can imagine, the legal fees of this are tremendous because the husband and wife have to fight this separately because of the way they press the charges. If that's not malicious, I don't know what is. Malicious intent is written all over this. Travis got his feelings hurt, and he decided, you know what, I'm going to make these people pay for hurting my feelings. And so there's definitely a weaponization of the system here, and it's not just in the mod case though. It's happened over the last 4 years in numerous situations, numerous land disputes between the Forest Service and other groups, other private entities. It's happened with farm raids. It's happened with the FDA, the USDA. The state agencies. They have been out of control, prosecuting people, taking people to court. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. It's an attack on the rural American infrastructure. It's an attack on our food supplies. It's an attack on a lot of things. And I think that's what the letter from Congress was kind of talking about was, hey, we're investigating not just this, but we're investigating a systematic thing that's been going on here that's got to come to a stop. We've got to protect our citizens. And yes, the U.S. Forest Service, I love Forest Service land. I love the importance of having parks and open spaces. And I think that there are some amazing Forest Service agents. I've met a lot of them over the years. To discredit them with this type of stuff is really heartbreaking, in my opinion. It discredits a lot of their work, discredits the entire system, weaponizing it like this. So anyway, I wanted to give an update on that because they do have a court case coming up. I sincerely hope that Trump pays attention to this case, puts an end to it. This isn't something that any American should have to go through. This, like I said, from the get-go, this should have never, ever been a case that was considered a criminal case. There's nothing criminal about it. It's all civil. But it's happened to these people. I think they deserve a major apology as this case is dismissed, and work it out in civil court. You know, I mean, look at these old property lines. We put things in place to help manage this type of situation when it arises, because we know that these old property lines are disputable. I mean, they've been there since before the Forest Service was there. It's crazy. I've put some information on their GoFundMe to help them with their legal fees on this channel in the past. But at this point in time, I think what we really need is an outcry of the public that puts this case on Trump's desk and says, hey, get your guys to look at this. You just pardoned a lot of people who shouldn't have been jailed in the first time. Political prisoners. These people are political prisoners, in my opinion, in a different type of politics. It may not be Republican versus Democrat, but it's definitely their political. Their intent is to make them political prisoners. Take a look at this case and get it back under control. Get it back into the right courtroom. These people don't deserve it. I get it. You mouth off to a Forest Service agent and his testosterone levels are going to go up. But at the same time, this guy was trespassing. And if anything, I would love to see charges brought against this Forest Service agent and everybody with him who went onto that land. And maybe, if people were just following orders, they were following orders. But I would love to see... I'd love to see this guy prosecuted. I don't care how decorated he was in the past. I don't care what he's accomplished throughout his career. Maybe that has only created, the situation we have now, a boosted ego with absolutely no control. Somebody acting on his own accord without a regional director. I mean, that's just wrong. That he should definitely face trespass charges. To the highest extent for what he's done. He had an agreement. Things were amicable. They were going to get a survey done together. He just decided to take matters into his own hands and thinks he can walk all over people. And there have been other cases, actually, of Forest Service agents trespassing onto private property to gather information and evidence without the property owner's permission, without a warrant. It's out of control. And I think people who do that should definitely face the consequences, face a little bit of time behind bars themselves, see what it's like to be a civilian for the rest of their lives and not have a badge. Anyway, guys, stay tuned. I have lots of subjects to talk about, but it's hard for me to get videos out at the moment. So I'm kind of recording these as I go, and then I'll edit them and get them out to you as soon as I possibly can. So have a great week.